the point, another key point is that the best way to motivate is to enhance the reasons for learning, all right, or enrolling in a class, and then decreasing the barriers to learning. In other words, staff need to be able to feel comfortable coming to you and sharing their experiences, and or sharing their experiences with you individually, or sharing their experiences in a group setting, and not feeling that other people are going to make fun or mock or chuckle at at what they've been learning, okay, or what they're doing. Okay, so the question I ask, which is a good forum question, and that is, what are some barriers to learning in your organization? Okay, it would be good for you to recognize what those barriers would be. And let me add something else that's not on this slide, and that is, how could these barriers be overcome based on what we've discussed presently, okay? What you need to do is establish a framework for educational supervision. And in doing this, there's 6 key principles that you must keep in mind. Clarify roles and responsibilities, your role, your responsibilities, the staff person's role and responsibilities. Describe how supervisory meetings will proceed when you begin a session, and what you're going to do in the next session, what you will be doing with that employee as you're beginning to work with them. Explain supervisory theory and how it will impact performance expectations. You need to be able to understand your theory in terms of what it is that your expectations are and how this is going to impact performance expectations. Elaborate on the process and standards for evaluating performance. Periodically go through a performance review with your staff person. Let them know what it is that you're going to be doing. And describe the procedure of giving and receiving feedback, whether it's positive or negative feedback. And I can't help but reiterate in terms of what the key principles are. Remember, in Principle 1, people learn best when they're highly motivated to learn. You need to be able to explain the usefulness of the content to be taught, make learning meaningful in terms of the individual's motives and needs, tie areas of low motivation to areas of high motivation, and because motivation is of such crucial significance, you need to have safeguards and stimulate motivation where it exists and instill it where it does not exist. Principle 2, I'm actually reviewing the earlier slides in more detail, and that is, we learn best when we can devote most of our energies to learning. Provide structure that means clearly establishing the time, place, roles, limits, expectations, obligations, and objectives of supervision. Respect the worker's rights within limits to determine his or her own solutions, and establish an atmosphere of accepting, psychologically safe, and a framework of security. In other words, don't ridicule the worker. They need to be able to feel comfortable that they can come back to you and ask you questions, and acknowledge what they already know, what they can already do, and move from the familiar to the unfamiliar, and demonstrate confidence in the worker's ability to learn. Know your content and be willing to teach it. The third principle, we learn best when learning is successful and rewarding. Set conditions of learning to a high probability of success. Okay? You need to be able to set standards and set guidelines and balance between what the skills of the worker and the challenges of what needs to be done. Increase positive satisfaction in learning by praising the worker. Praise their positive, praising helps, and periodically provide some formal evaluation and reviews every 6 months, every other session in terms of what they've been doing. Go back to past experiences, and ensuring the possibility of success if we partially learn. Okay, help make things bite-sized pieces. Success and positive satisfaction in learning are more likely if the material presented is graded in sequence from simple to complex. Okay, and you need to keep that in mind. The fourth principle, we learn best when we are actively involved in the learning process. Supervisors should be encouraged to participate in the planning agenda. Supervisees should plan their own agenda in the supervisory session. Okay, and you should encourage them to bring their agenda to you and begin with their agenda and then go from there. Ensure the more involvement the supervisee has in the learning process, the more opportunities they have to ask questions and to discuss and express doubt, the better the learning, and provide explicit opportunities to utilize and apply what it is that you're teaching them. And the fifth and sixth principles, just very briefly, we learn best that the content is meaningfully presented. How you present the content and show concerns and interest is very, very important. And being able to make connections to the general theoretical framework in terms of what you're providing that individual as a supervisor or principals, as a supervising PO or an investigator or an assessment specialist or a community service worker. Meaningful teaching is selective teaching. Some things are more important than others. All right, and you may spend more time with certain topics as opposed to other topics. Imaginative repetition makes learning more meaningful. Teaching that is planned with some continuity is very important. And learning is more meaningful. It can be if it's conscious and explicit. And in the last principle, to finalize this review, and as you establish the framework for educational supervision, and that is we learn best if the supervisor takes into consideration the supervisee's uniqueness. Individualized learning is very important. Everybody learns differently. You might need to spend more time with a new worker as compared to a senior worker, and you need to be able to understand that. Diagnose what you're learning, talk and process your learning, your teaching when you're working with individuals. Again, establishing a framework is important, and you need to clarify the roles and responsibilities around these 6 principles of learning. Okay, and you need to be able to describe how your meetings in supervision are going to work around these different principles. Explain your theory, where you're coming from, how this is going to impact performance expectations, elaborate the process and standards, and describe the procedure and how you plan to give feedback to that employee.